Mm. And mute. You're on mute.
Yes. Okay. Now, can you hear me better?
Yeah.
Greetings, everyone. How are you this evening?
Doing good?
Good, good. Welcome to Caregiver Chronicles, Friday Night Live, Ask Dr. Yvette Anything. Let me tell you a little bit about Caregiver Chronicles. Caregiver Chronicles is a 16-module online course for all aspects of caregiving, from the onset of your loved one's illness all the way until they recover or transition from the diagnosis. So Friday Night Live, Ask Dr. Yvette Anything, is an open forum to discuss various topics related to caregiving. Our guest tonight, we have Kris Brannon, who is a former caregiver, a gerontology student at the University of Southern California. She is the co-owner of the Bobcats women's football, and she is here with us tonight. So you want to say hello to us, Kris?
Hey, everyone.
Hi,
Thank you for having me, Dr. Dixon. I appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you for joining us. And then we also have Jennifer Fink, who is also a former caregiver. She is a podcast owner entitled Fading Memories, and she is the owner of Generations Photography. So I want to say hi to you, Jennifer. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Hello.
All righty. Thank you, ladies, for joining us. And then we have a couple of guests on the line as well. So hello to you as well. And feel free to chime in if you have a question as we're going through the session tonight, okay? So welcome, ladies, to Friday Night Live. The reason for this segment is to help others understand the importance of caregiving for various diagnoses, as each person will have a specific caregiver need based on their diagnosis and the stage of their progression of their diagnosis as well. So first and foremost, let's talk a little bit about a caregiver. What do you think is a caregiver? What are some of the attributes of a caregiver? What is a caregiver? Any thoughts about that, ladies?
I actually wrote an article on this.
Okay.
Because after my father died and we had to put my mom in memory care, I didn't consider myself a caregiver because she was in memory care. And I went
Okay.
to my first Alzheimer's caregiver support group and learned, yes, I was a caregiver. So you are a caregiver if you provide any sort of assistance for pretty much anybody. So if you've got a neighbor that you're helping out, picking up groceries, which, you know, many of us are doing right now during this pandemic, but in normal times, whatever those might
Right.
look like in the future,
Right. Right.
you have a friend who's had knee replacement and you drive them to the doctor or you go visit, you know, that's care, you know, it's temporary, but it's caregiving. You know, if you're a grandchild and you go over and you mow your grandparents' lawn or you help your parent who's caring for their parent, all of that is a caregiver. And so pretty much in conclusion, we're all caregivers at some point in our lives.
Right. Even if
I-
you're a parent too. Chris, anything on caregiving for you?
Jennifer hit it. Anytime that you're caring for someone who has any type of disability, whether, like I said, mowing the lawn, going for groceries, taking the doctor's appointment, reminded of medications, anything that has to do with the care of another person is caregiving for me.
Right, right. And you know what? Doesn't necessarily have to be a disability either. It could
No,
just be a kid that needs help,
Yes.
someone that's dependent. They may not be able to handle their affairs. They may not be disabled physically, mentally, psychologically, or socially, but they also still may need some help. So basically, when you're a caregiver, you're responsible for anything related to the well-being of that person. And so that's so important. So let's talk a bit about your experiences as a caregiver. And then I'll share with you, of course, my experience as a caregiver as well.
First,
Kris, you want to start out?
yeah, back in 2011, I believe my grandmother was the first person I gave care to. I noticed when she got older that her cognitive abilities were a little different and I couldn't understand it. She was not the same person that I remembered. And that's what drove me to get into working with older adults. Grandmother needed groceries. She needed somebody to clean her house. I did laundry. So I did a long list of things to help her, you know, so that she didn't have to do it. And then once I realized that it was important for me to learn, I went into caregiving myself and started providing care for other people. I then worked for 24-hour care agency. It's an agency here in Los Angeles that provides care through South Bay area.
Okay.
So in the last 10 years, I think I've worked with roughly 350 clients in the last 10 years. So I've been able to help people that quadriplegics, cancer patients, people that suffer from diabetes, people with defibrillators, people that can't talk, people that can't hear. So I've dealt with a lot of different populations as far as disabilities are concerned. I work with Alzheimer's patients. It's endless. I mean, I've been doing this for a long time and I really enjoy working with people, in particularly elder adults.
Right. Wow, you've had a well-rounded experience as a caregiver because each experience as a caregiver is going to be different.
Always different.
Every person is going to have a special need with regard to caregiving, and it's very valuable when you can adjust your style of caregiving, if you will, to their need. And so that's so important. How about you, Jennifer? Any thoughts about that and your caregiver experience?
Well, my mom had Alzheimer's for at least 20 years, so it was a very long journey. And I did what I could to help my dad, but he was really resistant. And so I didn't really have a lot of experience until he passed away in March of 2017. And like I said, because she was in the memory care, it was about 6 months before I went to my first support group and learned, yeah, you actually are a caregiver. And what my goal with my mom was to provide her with, the enjoyable experiences and not that she had memories, but, like intuitive memories of enjoyable times with me. And I was part of the team that took care of her. So I witnessed other family members whose loved ones were in the memory care, and they would have expectations of the staff, and can you do this and can you get me that? And it's like, no, they're not here to do stuff for you. They're here to take care of your loved one. You're here to take care of your loved one too. Just because your family member is not living with you or on their own, if they're in a memory care residence or assisted living community, you're still in charge and you're still responsible for them. So that was my approach, is that we were all a team to do what mom needed and to take the best care of her possible. And it was challenging at times.
Okay, yeah, it is a challenge. I'll just tell you a little bit about my caregiver experience. My mother had Alzheimer's disease for 9 years, and I was her caregiver. And during that time, oh gosh, I was going to school full time. I was working full time. I had 3 sons. I was a single parent at the same time, and so I was her primary caregiver, and there was no one else helping other than me. And so after, a period of time, when I realized it was time to get caregivers to come in and help her, I was blessed because there were these 2 ladies that came in. They were Belizean ladies, actually. And they told me, look, we know what you're doing. Go take care of your sons, deal with all of your other stuff, your work, your school, all of that. And we are going to take care of your mom. And so that was a blessing for me. And let me tell you, they took care of my mom like she was their mom. And so that was the biggest blessing because it allowed me to deal with my 3 teenage sons, teenagers. It allowed me to work full time. It allowed me to continue my schooling. And then I continued my schooling, and mom did not pass until a few months after I finished school. So it was just a blessing to have somebody that I could trust to take care of her and not have to worry about her during that time frame. So let's talk a little bit about the different diagnoses, because each diagnosis will require a special skill set, if you will, as a caregiver. Cancer patients may have a specific need depending on the level of their illness, where they are. In the beginning stages, it may not be as hands-on, if you will, of the disease, but as it progresses, then it requires you to adjust as a caregiver to be able to understand what the needs of that patient is. So can you talk a little bit about that, ladies, or anybody in the audience that's listening in? If you have had a caregiver experience, please unmute yourself and join in the conversation with us.
I have had 2 particular cancer patients. Early on, they weren't sick. They were in the stages where they were getting chemo. And I watched the tiredness. I watched just their inability to do things after chemo. That was the hardest thing. And they so wanted to be independent, especially in the beginning stages. They're psychologically, they feel like they're capable. And then reality kind of sets in, and they're tired a lot and they can't get a lot of things done. So as a caregiver, when I worked with them, my job was just to get an understanding of what they needed. Right. And try to get them to understand their limitations, even though their mind wanted to keep going, to do things, running errands, but their body was saying something totally different. So it was my job to go in and be the middle person between mind and body, you know what I mean? Making sure that their diet is well, trying to make sure that they eat well, because that's another side effect of the chemo is you lose a lack of appetite. And a lot of them lost weight. So my job was to go in and encourage eating. Another thing is being part of the care team of the doctors that were treating the patient. It was me, the patient, the doctor. So anything that the doctors relayed to the patient, my job was to get a complete understanding so that if there was something they were missed, that I was able to explain it to them where they were cognitively better. Because again, when they're weak, you're not really absorbing everything. So I was always there to make sure that I had that pen, that paper, and write down what changed from the last time you went, or the last diagnosis, or the last progression. So. Right.
Yeah, when you are a caregiver, you are basically the navigator. You are driving the car and you're doing everything. You're making sure they take their medication. You're making sure they're eating. You're making sure that they're sleeping, resting. You're making sure that all of their needs are being met. And so that's really a critical piece of the caregiving, is going to the doctor with them, knowing what the diagnosis is. Sometimes people are resistant when they have a need for caregiving. They don't want everybody to know what their, what their ailment is, what their limitations are, if you will. And so sometimes it can be very difficult as a caregiver, because you can run into the resistance, as Jennifer said, with her father, who was resistant to the care. And that's that makes it even more difficult, because you have someone you love, that you're trying to take care of, and they are fighting your every whim, if you will, your every intervention, if you will. They're trying to keep you from doing the best thing to keep them safe. And so that makes it even more difficult. I will say that I was blessed, because my mom never got angry. She only had one day that she got a little bit upset with the people at the adult daycare. They tried to take her purse, and she didn't want to give it to them. And so she hit them with her cane. And then after that, they called me, "You got to come and get her." And I was like, "Okay, I'm on my way." So when I got there, I knew that every day Mama had to have that purse when she went to that daycare. And so I sent that purse, empty as it was, with her every single day. So it's really important that you're hands-on and that you understand that person, if you will. So any other diagnoses that you all have been caregiver for that you want to talk about? There's many diagnoses. There's blindness, there's hearing impairment, diabetes mellitus, Alzheimer's disease, all kinds of multiple sclerosis. Is there any other diagnosis, or anyone on the line that has a diagnosis they want to just touch on?
I'd like to talk about diabetes.
Yes, ma'am.
I've given care to several individuals with diabetes, and of course, the challenge with diabetes is their meals, and the ability to get them to buy into controlling how much sugar they have, and their desire to feel normal, because some of my patients have had to take insulin, which is a chore within itself. And so they really require a lot of support, because that's not an easy thing to get up every day and give yourself insulin. It certainly works on their mood. And even if you can get them to eat, because the mood affects their desire to want food. So you really have to be sensitive. As you said with your mom and her purse, you have to be really sensitive to how they're feeling each day. Just saying hello can be met with not happy, not a happy response. But what you have to do is realize that you're there to support them. It's not about you and how you feel. It is to uplift them enough to at least get through another day. So people who have diabetes, there's a myriad of issues, especially when they're under the doctor's care. They don't want to take their other medications that, the metformin. For some reason, people just don't like swallowing that pill. And so, it's your job is basically that, to hold their hand and tell them, this is all designed to make you feel better.
Yeah, that's the beauty of it. I was thinking about the diabetes, and it's a balancing act with diabetes, because you could eat something. And I think we talked about this last week. I don't know if you guys recall, or if any of you were listening in last week, but you can eat something in the morning when you get up, and it'll run your blood sugar all the way up to the sky.
That is correct.
So you have to figure out what your body requires when you're diabetic, because if you eat something in the morning and it runs your blood sugar up, then you have to wait and eat later. You have to figure out what your body, the body's balance is with the diabetes. So, and I learned that because I had gestational, pregnant women get gestational diabetes. And let me tell you, you couldn't put anything in my mouth that I wasn't supposed to have at that time, because I didn't want to take insulin. They told me, if you don't control this, you're going to take insulin. I was like, okay. Didn't put anything in my mouth that I wasn't supposed to have, because I didn't want to give myself a shot. And I knew that. And so it's really a difficult thing when you find out you have a diagnosis. to be able to manage that diagnosis and understand it, and just follow the regimen that's associated there too. So anyway, any other comments about the different diagnoses? Anyone else?
I can touch a little bit on the diabetes. That's my dad had diabetes.
Okay.
And it seems like there are two types of people with diabetes. The way you were with the gestational, I
Right.
am not giving myself shots, therefore I'm going to do exactly what I need to do. And then there's people like my dad who are like, I'm going to eat what I want and die happy.
Yes, yes.
Let me guarantee you that did not happen.
Right.
Yeah.
Nobody around him was happy when he was on hospice either. So
Oh,
it's interesting, and it's got to be psychological, because like I said, I've met both kinds of people. I haven't really met anybody that's in between. It's either black or white. You either do what you need to do or you just
or you don't.
wing it.
Yeah.
And my dad was on insulin. We tried to keep him on the insulin shots when he was on hospice, even though the hospice team wasn't terribly interested in that because of the hazards of him potentially jabbing somebody with a needle.
Oh,
It was a challenge. He had a kidney transplant in 2009 that was failing because, he ate what he wanted.
man.
And he did not want to go back on dialysis, which was, I understood that. Dialysis is really, really hard on you.
Oh, I don't wish that on anyone.
I went on a very huge weight loss journey because I had a client that was a doctor, and she said, you are 100 pounds overweight, you have a family history of diabetes, and you're screwed. And that was the right term to use with me, because I was like, I'll show you, I'll fix this. And I did.
Oh, yes. No,
And then
yes.
I found out that it is also beneficial. Controlling your blood sugar is extremely important for keeping your cognitive health. So
Yes.
They had a study in our class this last week, and they said that 80% of people who suffer from diabetes, who have that type 2 diabetes, 80% will have the Alzheimer's disease. It's linked.
Really?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. I
So
just
diabetes leads to
Alzheimer's.
cognitive impairment.
Yes,
Wow, I'd never heard that before. That's a new one on me.
it's a study.
if that's not a reason to watch your blood sugar and eat right,
Yeah.
you need to go to a memory care residence and spend the afternoon, because that will convince you.
Yes.
Def-
Amen.
Definitely. Definitely.
That's what happened with my dad. It was the Tuesday after Thanksgiving 2016. My husband, my daughter, and I went to visit, put up Christmas decorations for my mom. My husband got there first. He walked in the door. My dad said, "Hey, how's the credit union business treating you?" And my husband went, I haven't been in the credit union business for 13 years. So literally, it felt like it was overnight, but in hindsight, there were signs that his mind wasn't quite right. But compared to my mom, he was like an Einstein. So
Yeah.
it was, it wasn't until, you could look backwards and go, oh yeah, that was probably a sign. So it's definitely, you gotta, unfortunately, chronic diseases, we gotta watch what we eat and sleep right and exercise and all that stuff that we don't want to do.
Right.
I think that's one of the reasons why I'm really proud of my women's football team, is because the reason why I wanted it was for health reasons. We know that people of color have a higher disproportionate rate of all of morbidities and mortalities here in the US. And what better way to, teach women how to take care of themselves. We have, players who suffer from diabetes, and once they get through a season, that their levels go down, and they learn that the exercise and the eating right is very important. And as a caregiver, like, our job is to educate as well, because at the end of the day, if they don't know, it's our job to teach them. And I've taken that approach with every single client, every single patient I've ever had. Is it's a teaching moment for them. I tell people all the time, a lot of people don't like taking medicine. They don't want to take the medication. They feel like they're the doctor. They know more than the doctor. But the reality is you can look good, you can look 35 and you're 68. But if your insides are saying I'm 88 and I'm 68, that's a difference. So,
Right.
we have to be able to educate the people that we care for about what is appropriate behaviors for longevity and to age successfully.
Yes.
At the end of the day, we're all going to have some type of ailment. That is the way our bodies are designed. It's how do you manage them? And as caregivers, how do we help people manage their chronic illness or disease?
Yeah, it's a critical piece of life, basically, because we all will face some type of ailment, not unless we're lucky to just, all of a sudden, you know what I'm saying? That's rare. And so we all definitely have to take heed to that. I was thinking about diabetes and the ramifications of the disease, having the neuropathy, and some people have amputations behind it, and then they go blind behind. I mean, it's just really a difficult disease to have, and go through it. And if you can still do what's right, but the disease is the disease, and it may still result in those types of repercussions. But it's important that you manage your food, your intake, your exercise. All of those things are important. And I'm preaching to the choir because I hate to do those things too. We all do, but sometimes you get caught up with your life and you're doing other stuff and you kind of ignore yourself. But it's important that we focus on ourselves and make sure that we have, that we take care of ourselves. And as caregivers, a critical piece of caregiving too is recognizing the changes in the client's mental, physical, psychological, and emotional health. Because a lot of times when the person is dealing with an ailment, they're not going to think the normal way that they should. And so it's up to the caregiver to be that voice of reason, to be the one who can tell them, no, you have to do it this way, because if you don't, this is what's going to happen. This is, what could happen. And so let's talk a little bit about the mental, physical, emotional, and psychological piece of the caregiving experience. Any thoughts on that, ladies and gentlemen?
Well, I'd like to say in terms of the emotional aspect, the one thing that I have found is helping them to cope with the day-to-day stress. Saying things that will encourage them, because many days when you talk to them, they'll tell you they just want to die, and I just want to not be in this pain, and I want to enjoy life. And so one of the things that I have found as a challenge is to help them understand that I'm here to help you make the choice to have a better life. And it's okay to enlist my support emotionally to help you get through this. So it's a real trust factor that you have to build.
Oh, yeah.
And sometimes you will win people over and sometimes you won't. Right. But if they believe that they can trust you, that's a huge step.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. So that has been my experience.
Yeah, it is huge. Trust is critical, because if you have a client and they don't trust you, or your loved one or whomever, they don't trust you, then they'll be scared to eat the food that you give them. They'll be scared to
really sabotage.
Take the medication you're trying to give them, everything. So you really want to establish a trust factor with your clients. That is really important. Let me just say this, if I may. Caregiver Chronicles is the 16-module online course, and it takes you from the onset of your loved one's illness all the way until they transition. We talk about the diagnosis, we talk about the caregiver, we talk about the insurance matters, we talk about advanced directive, POST, Physician's Order for Life-Sustaining Treatment, which is a DNR. I'm sure you all may have heard that term. These are some of the courses that are included. It is an all-inclusive set of courses for caregiving. So it's not just one or the other. You have everything, and you also have live consultations with me as well. So let me check the chat, because someone just typed in the chat. Let's see what we have here. If anyone has any experience, can someone talk about what it is like to be caregiver when one might have a chronic condition themselves while caring for someone who has cancer or another condition? Okay, thank you for that question. Is there anybody that wants to talk about that, having a chronic condition yourself and being a caregiver for someone else?
So the one thing that I can say about that is we have to make sure as caregivers that we are taking care of ourselves as well. We are no good to the person that we're caring for if we have not, or we're not taking care of ourselves.
Right.
That is the most important thing that I can pretty much say about caregiving for someone else. The other thing is to make sure that you're realistic about your abilities to help the person you're caring for, because if your illness is not managed, then again, you're no help to the person that you're caring for. So you might want to talk to family members or other people in your family to help you manage the person you're caring for, so that you get time to be able to take care of yourself. What we don't want as caregiver is to put so much time into someone else that we neglect ourselves, and now we're in a situation where we're sicker than the person that we're caring for.
Right, that's critical piece of it. Also, as a caregiver, if you are caring for someone and you have your own chronic illness, you may need to not be a caregiver, okay? And I'm gonna just put it all out there, because we're gonna be we open about this whole thing. If you have a loved one and you're caring for them, and you have your own chronic illness, you might need to take a look at the whole picture and see if it's feasible to get someone else to take care of that other person, and maybe even yourself if you need it. Because if you are caregiving and you have medical needs or needs as well, it's difficult because you're taking on double stress, basically. You're taking on your stress for your own illness, and you're also taking on stress for someone else's illness. Even though you love them, I get it. It could be your husband, it could be your sibling or whomever, or your parent, but you have to think about what's the ramifications of being a caregiver for two people, basically, because that's what you're doing. And so that's important also. Anybody else want to chime in on that?
Yeah, I can actually chime in on that one, because as I said, my dad had diabetes and he was completely resistant to assistance from the two daughters. And I think that was a mistake. Well, I know it was a mistake. And one of the things that I advocate for frequently in person on the podcast is, if you suspect that your loved one has Alzheimer's or any of these really devastating diseases,
Mm-hmm.
or they've just been recently diagnosed, you need to put your care team in place right then. Because if you wait until you're, up to your eyeballs drowning, and, and now people have to like dive into the deep end of caring, and with somebody with Alzheimer's, that's really hard. Now you're like, you don't understand the subtleties of dealing with somebody with Alzheimer's. Like, my mom was great. If you went, like, she walked and talked, literally, she fell and broke her leg, but she walked and talked literally up until 2.5 weeks before she passed away. But when she spoke, it made perfectly good sense as a sentence, but there was no historical context, no reference. And if you went, what, like, what is she saying? And you scrunched up your face and you're like, huh? Boom, instant anger from her. And I just tried to be respectful. It was my mom. I tried to be respectful and say, I didn't want to just be like, oh yeah, okay, that sounds good, and just, kind of in my mind blow her off. So those kind of subtleties, it's very difficult to just jump in and help. So get your care team together in advance. And one of the, a lot of people think, oh, well, I don't know if I want to help my neighbor or my, my aunt or whatever with personal daily, activities of daily living.
Right.
There are things people can do for you to help relieve stress. Like, I cannot deal with insurance companies, banks. I get on the phone with those people 2 minutes in, I'm ready to like roll bombs through doors. It's just my tolerance level for the bureaucratic nonsense is pathetic. Just, I'm just pathetic at it. My husband, he can just wander around the house on hold for 2 hours just with his phone in his pocket. He doesn't even care. And it irritates me when he does that. So you can have, maybe if you've got a family member that's out of state, or, like you yourself, Yvette, were, really super busy, You know, maybe they're good at making the phone calls, or they can handle setting up online bill paying and checking the, you know, making sure everything is getting handled that way. There's little pieces of the puzzle that other people can do. They don't even have to be in your same town or nearby.
Right.
So there's a lot of options for putting a care team together. You just really need to do it early on.
I agree.
Right. Thank you for that. Anybody else want to chime in on that?
Well, I would like to, because I do have high blood pressure myself.
Okay.
And what I've found is, well, I believe in taking my medication and staying active and eating right and all of the things that I've been asked to do, because I want to not be able to take medication one day. So, you know, I do everything I can to stay healthy myself. But I have found that sharing the fact that I have a chronic illness myself with my patients has helped, because then they feel like at least I have some understanding about what it is that they are going through themselves.
Right.
So in sharing that information with my clients, it's been helpful, because then they want to know, okay, well, how do you have a sunny disposition? And how do you, follow the rules, and how do you eat right? So they become inquisitive, and generally I share, for me, it's about my faith. It's about doing what I need to do, because I want to live as long as I possibly can with a great sense of zeal. So I know that in order to do that, I got to do the right thing.
Right.
But it's been helpful for me having an illness to be more sympathetic to their chronic illnesses. So I think it has made me a lot more empathetic, because I'm there myself in terms of having a challenge.
Yes.
And for me as a caregiver, what I learned is there's some things that I'm good at, and there's just some things that I'm not so good at. So like, yes. Carolyn is there, and she was just talking, and we've worked together.
Okay. Hi, Carolyn.
And she's a religious person, and I'm more spiritual, and she's religious. But I have a client, this last client just passed away a couple of weeks ago, and Carolyn served so much of a purpose in this lady's life, because she was very religious, and she loved God, and she believed in Jesus, and those are the things that she took on. And Carolyn I'm not that person, right? But I was able to bring Carolyn in to give her a sense of normalcy, a sense of, this is what her practice is. She would pray and sing, and that was Carolyn's job. I couldn't do what Carolyn did, So like she said about getting your care team together, I had to find somebody. When Carolyn came to me, it was like I was in dire need of some type of recreation, some type of spiritual something for this lady, because I couldn't do it. I felt like I was losing the battle, right? Mm-hmm. Carolyn came in, she did that. The lady, she just instantly came alive after Carolyn came in. So again, getting the care team together, making sure you have people in place. If you're not good at something, you got to find someone else who is good at that job. You said you don't phone, you don't want to hold on the phone. I'm okay with holding on the phones. I can do that. I can deal with the doctors. Carolyn, some things that Carolyn just is not her thing. And we know this about each other, but our care for our client was more important than our personal, what we felt we lacked at. So I gave her a job, she did her job, and she did it well. And again, Carolyn, thank you for everything you've done for us. And it's been
well, it was my pleasure to do it.
Carolyn was respite care. That's what she calls Carolyn.
Carolyn came in.
Oh, okay. I'll take that.
So it's important that everybody has a care team and people that's on your sidelines, that if you need something, that you can definitely call them and fill in, especially if you're sick. That's the other thing is, caregivers, we get sick too. And what do you do when you get sick? And do you have people in place to care for the people that you're caring for when you're not available?
Right. Thank you. Yeah, Carolyn was respite, because it's important that you recognize your strengths and weaknesses as a caregiver, because everybody is going to have a different, response, if you will, to the stressor or whatever it might be. So it's important to recognize that. We have another comment in the chat. Let me read it for you, ladies and gentlemen. How can we help people feel more comfortable when they need more intimate care like toileting, especially when they may or may not, or may not need help bathing or wiping? Or I think they may need help bathing or wiping. So basically, how can you help a person feel more comfortable regarding intimate care as far as toileting, bathing, you know, and wiping and cleaning themselves and that type of thing? How can you make them feel more comfortable with that? That's a real caregiver question right there.
It's a trust thing. Carol and I, we both know that our last client, she wasn't as open with Carolyn about her person, her body, and you know, going to the bathroom and taking showers and things. So I took that role, but Melanie was okay with me taking that role. So it's about talking to them, because these things have to be done, right? We don't want bed sores, we don't want infections, we don't want those things. And in order for us, it's uncomfortable having uncomfortable conversations, right? Like, it's uncomfortable. We have to have those conversations with people because there's a purpose for it. So if somebody needs toiletry or bathing, the purpose is to help them get clean so they don't have sores, so they don't have infections. So that you can start at that platform, explaining why that particular task needs to be done or they need help with. But it comes down to a trusting. Everyone has a dignity up until a certain point. When you get to a point where you don't care who sees you naked, you don't care, you know, but until that point happens, everybody has dignity. So it's just a conversation that needs to happen, right? And the reason why, you know what I mean? And usually if it's health benefit, if it's keeping them clean, keeping them from getting a bed sore, usually most clients really don't have a problem. No one wants to sit in, you know, messy pants usually. So you do have some that don't care, that or have a hard time with anybody helping them, but our job as caregivers to keep encouraging toileting, keep encouraging taking baths. And the reason why we do it is so that we don't get sick, so that we don't have infections, so we don't get bed or pressure sores.
Right. And you know what? Alzheimer's disease is a whole new world, because a lot of times they don't want to
take a bath.
They don't want to do anything. And if they resist you and they don't want to clean themselves, or you got a serious situation at that point.
I've had working with 24-hour care, they sent me out to a gentleman. He was a sole provider of his family. It was him and his wife. And he turned into a whole different person. And he hadn't taken a bath in, I don't know, 3 or 4 months. And my job was to be there every day until I get him to take a bath. Now he did. It took me 3 weeks to get him to take a bath. But 4 months prior to that, he hadn't had a bath. And 3 weeks before I got there, he didn't have a bath. And my job was to get him comfortable enough. The man chased me out of the house I had to take knives out of the house because he chased me around his big house with knives. He locked me out of the house where I couldn't get out to get back in. And I had to have the fire department come in and had the neighbors help me hop over the gate. But like, those are the real stories about, especially people with Alzheimer's, where they don't want to take a bath. And people are calling caregivers out to help family members give bath because, you know, we don't want infections and bed sores and everything else that comes along with not taking a bath. So you're right. Alzheimer's patients it's a very difficult patient to deal with.
I've discovered a remedy that'll at least get the conversation started and feel comfortable. The idea is, I found that if you can get them to agree to soak their hands or soak their feet, and it's nice warm water, then they'll be more amenable to going a little further. So one of the things that I've tried is to make sure that they can soak their hands and say, you know, doesn't that feel great? Right. Or soak their feet and wash their feet. And it's amazing because it calms them down and it allows them to understand you're not being combative, that you are really there to make them feel better. So I learned that little trick that you can try is to start with soaking hands or soak the feet, because they feel in charge of that. They don't feel that somebody is imposing that on them. So the idea is to kind of take the impositional aspect away. And if they're just there enjoying that nice warm water, then you can have a conversation and say, well, would you like to do this yourself, or you need a little help? And that way they'll kind of warm up to the idea a little bit better. Right.
Jennifer, any thoughts about that for you? We have another comment in the chat too. We'll go over that in a second.
I do. I have a couple of suggestions and like a quick story. So
Okay.
I had a guest on the podcast whose mother was like not interested in taking a shower. She took care of mom in their own home. So she would, before she got mom out of bed, she would go in the bathroom, get everything out. She would start the shower, and then she would basically escort her mom to the bathroom. Her mom was still able to toilet on her own. And because the shower was running, it just kind of triggered like reflexive memory, and mom would get into the shower. So that's one thought. My mom was super combative about showers. I am 100% convinced that's why she fell and broke her leg, because she was fighting with the caregivers, and that's not their fault. That was hers. But a couple of suggestions that I tried to get them to try, and I don't know if they did, is, sometimes people are, like, I don't really want somebody looking at me naked. So, and I don't think anybody wants to be looking at me naked. So if you put like a really lightweight towel around them, then, and just kind of soap the spots that need to be soaped and move the towel, it gives them a sense of privacy and, coverage. I also have a past guest who this pandemic has really not served her at all well. She uses a non-rinse wipe because the feel of the water on her skin is just, it's not soothing. Like for those of us that don't have broken brains, it feels weird. It's not comfortable for her. She doesn't, she don't want to get in the shower because it's unpleasant. So she uses the, essentially these, they're like shower wipes. And I'm sorry, I don't have I could probably pull up her comment with them, but I'm sure they're easy enough to find. I think that was my only other thought.
Okay. So I have a couple of questions in the chat again. Let's see. How do you establish trust with that type of patient when they are cognitively impaired? So how do you get the person to trust you when they have the dementia or the Alzheimer's? And I think, Ms. Carol, if that's your name, ma'am, I think you kind of touched on that a little bit about making them feel comfortable and just kind of embracing them and, letting them know that you care and giving them some TLC, if you will. And they will kind of go along with you.
However they choose to express themselves, just go with that. If they're telling you a story that you have absolutely no understanding about, ask questions and involve yourself in the conversation, even though you have no idea as to where the conversation is going. But it lets them know that even though she has some understanding that I know what to say, I know what I'm saying, even you don't. It's just to just go with the flow. Don't say, well, you sure about that? Because then they have to think. And so that can upset them. So just go with whatever the conversation is. Don't try to correct them and say, oh, no, it didn't quite happen that way. Just say, oh, yes, I hear what you're saying. And just keep it moving forward. And that's how you build the trust, because they know that you're really there to understand what it is that's going on with them.
Right.
And so people like to.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
They like to be the center of attention. So that's what you do, is make them the center of attention.
Right. Especially if there's someone with dementia or Alzheimer's, when they're in their moment of confusion, if you will, it is not a good thing to challenge them or question them or, talk to them as if I don't understand you, you know what I mean? Because there is a way to help them understand. And I'll tell you this, I'll share this with you all. I walked into the room with my mother one day and she was making efforts to dress herself. And so when I looked at her, I said, hi, Mom, what you doing? She said, I'm trying to dress myself. She said, but I'm losing my mind like that. And when she said that, I looked at her. She had her panties or underwear on her head. She had her slip, you know, she was all discombobulated. She was trying to dress herself. But my thought was, and I already knew what I was dealing with. Thank God I was working on my MSW at USC. I was like, okay, you know what you're dealing with because you're going to school right now, learning it every single day. And so what I told her, I said, well, Mom, you're okay. I said, let me help you. And so I just helped her because I didn't say, oh yeah, Mom, you are losing your mind. You know, you are doing something wrong. You know what I'm saying? That's not the way to respond to anyone, not just somebody with dementia or Alzheimer's. But if a person is ill and they're not handling things as they should, then it's up to us or you all or whomever is listening in as a caregiver to make that person feel comfortable. Because if you make them feel like they're incompetent, that's gonna push them in another direction. So you never want to do that. You want to always promote autonomy, promote positive affirmation, if you will, for that person. So that's, I wanted to just say that.
And a lot of times we have to remember that somebody that's has some type of cognitive impairment, sometimes behaviors is a language.
Mm-hmm.
So like if somebody's hurting and they really can't express that to you, they act out in certain ways. And so us as caregivers, our job is to make sure that we understand that it may not be an acting out because it could be because they're hurting and they're trying to say, I'm hurting inside or I have a headache. They don't know how to verbalize it, but they're going to act a certain way. You're looking at them like, why are they acting like this right now? Mm-hmm. And you have to be, as a caregiver with someone with Alzheimer's, you have to be able to be in tune with figuring out what is it that they really are saying. Because behaviors are sporadic, but they're not really sporadic because it's really something they're trying to tell you.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and you have to learn them, actually.
You have to learn them, yes.
And I think the main thing for me, being my mother's daughter, if you will, was me to have the mindset that I was no longer her daughter. I was her daughter biologically, for all intents and purposes, but cognitively and, you know, in the real time, I was no longer her daughter, I was her mother. And that was a big transition for me to be the one to understand that. And I think when I really realized that was when I just had to be everything for her. I took her everywhere with me. You know, I just made sure all of her needs were met. And it took a minute, but I understood that you're not her daughter anymore. You're her mother now. So I treated her as if I had 3 sons and I had a daughter. You know what I mean? And so no disrespect, but I just had to look at it that way for my mental being to understand that I was her, you know, I was her daughter. I wasn't her daughter anymore. So I just wanted to say that. We have another comment in the chat here. Can someone talk about some of the hardest things about being a caregiver and the most rewarding, or what can one do if they need modifications or more help but can't afford it? Are there resources one can send to the client? And let me just touch on that and then we can all chime in on it. The hardest thing for me about being a caregiver was to watch the slow progression progression of dementia to Alzheimer's, to my mother being a pillar of our household, being the matriarch of our family, and her dwindling down to being bedbound and bedridden and not being able to do anything for herself. That was the hardest part about being the caregiver, was watching that process and not being able to do anything about it. Okay, that for me. Now that was my thing. As far as resources, there's many resources and we can always help you with that. If you have any questions about resources, you can email me at caregiverchronicles247@gmail.com. There are many resources depending on what the needs are for your loved one. We will make sure that you get them. Is there anyone else that wants to chime in on the hardest thing about being a caregiver and the most rewarding thing? Let me just say this and I'll let you guys chime in. The most rewarding thing for me was being able to care for my mother and make sure that all of her needs were met, knowing that I'd done the best that I could, knowing that everything was taken care of for her. And I'm going to say this also, there's always one person in a family who will be that person. You might have 10 siblings, and you might be that only one that's going to be the one. And I was that one, okay? Just say that. So just know that that can happen in families. It can tear families apart. Really, it can really tear families apart.
My Lord.
Yes. And so it's just about that one person that's going to be there through the whole thing and make sure that all the needs are met for the loved one. Okay, anybody else want to chime in on that?
I can pop in. Oh, sorry, Kris.
Okay, go ahead.
I can pop in.
Well, my mom thought I was her best friend. She told everybody she'd known me forever, which always made me chuckle because of course she's known me forever. I'm not her best friend. And it was after a while of her being in the memory care, I got to the point where I'm like, I can't deal with this. With her is enough. I ended up dealing with other residents. Sometimes, I would take actually my mom and another resident out. My mom liked to watch kids, and it was hard because she walked so slow and watched her feet, which is hazardous. But there was one day last year in September, I showed up and my husband and I had just flown in back from Colorado. And so I was really tired and I thought I better not take her out because I knew I was setting myself up for a big problem because of how I felt. And I knew my tolerance and my patience was not great. And I got there and she goes, "Oh, where are we going?" And I was like, "Oh boy, I feel like the bad person today," because we weren't going anywhere, but I had kind of like, I don't know, trained her mind that I was the fun person. And there was a conversation we had, and this goes back to being in their reality, where she was telling me how her brothers were normal people now. And I went, "Oh, really? That's really good to hear. I'm so glad they're normal because, it's not good not to be normal." And it was funny. And, and I didn't try to correct her because, I don't know, maybe my uncles really aren't all that normal.
Right.
And, but some of the hardest parts came in the last 10 months. She just kept getting more and more combative.
Yeah.
And it took the littlest thing to set her off. She was having an issue with the pull-ups. She was in the bathroom. Why the woman crossed her legs to try to pull up her underwear, the depends, I will never understand. But I knew that if I tried to help her, that I was risking having a fight, getting smacked, she was really good at clawing people. She drew blood on caregivers. It was not fun.
Oh, wow.
I let her, I chased that demon until the end. And like I said, she jerked away from one of the caregivers after a shower and slipped and fell and broke her leg. And that was the beginning of the end. So like I said, her combativeness was probably her undoing. But this one particular day, she's literally struggling. She's got a toe hooked in the hole of the depends. We all have this problem. You're pulling up your underwear, your pants, and you get the wrong leg up, or we all struggle with that. And I let her deal with it. I left the bathroom. I could hear her grumbling. And so I finally went in and I said, "Oh, I have this problem all the time." And I unhooked her toe, and then I left the bathroom again because I knew she got herself all put together. She stomps into her bedroom and says, "I hate it when people try to help me," and stomped right out of the room. And I'm like, "Well, okay then, bye." And in about 3 or 4 minutes, she came back around. She's like, "Oh, hi, what are you doing here?" It was like, okay, this is it was exhausting mentally, but there was, surprisingly, if somebody had told me back in 2017, "Oh, there'll be like funny moments with your mom," I would have just laughed in their face. And there really were. There was some touching, interesting, funny moments. And those kind of helped get through some of the moments when she wanted to kill me and I wanted to kill her.
Right. Yeah, it's a hard transition mentally for everyone.
Well, for me, I would say the most challenging part is not knowing what you're going to get emotionally each day. But the most rewarding part is when they say thank you. There are times that they are genuinely able to express how they felt about how you've treated them, and they can say thank you. So I would say for me, hearing the thank you makes it all worth it.
Mm-hmm. Kris, were you trying to say something? Or?
For me, my parents are still fairly young. My dad just retired a few months back. My mother is still working. So I think I have some ways to go before I have to be caregiver and parent to my parents. But as a paid caregiver, as a person that has been paid to go out into community and be of service, the most rewarding thing is knowing that the clients that I care for, I know that they're getting quality, they're getting their money's worth, and they're getting genuine love, right? I love what I do. I love seniors. I love older adults. The most challenging thing for me as a caregiver is to lose and watch, to lose someone that you care about. Of all the 350 people that I have ever given care to, I fell in love with one person. And I lost her 2 weeks ago. And I know that she knew that she was blessed. She knew that she had everything taken care of, and she had no problem giving gratitude for the jobs that we did. The hardest part for me is not knowing when the last day and what the last day will look like. I have this envision of everybody that I care for, like, okay, this might happen, right? This could happen because of the disease, right? They have the illness, and these are the progressive getting worse. You know exactly what's going to happen. But then when you have someone who has an accident and falls and hurts themselves and die, right. That's my first experience, and that's been the hardest thing for me to cope with, is knowing that someone that I care for died on my watch, not per se on my watch, but I was the person there every day, and that day I was not there. So the hardest thing for me is losing someone and not knowing how you're going to lose them. But
yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Jackson.
Yes. Yes, Pastor Davis. This is Pastor Marcus Davis. You want to chime in with us, Pastor?
Yes, thank you so very much. This has been very educational and very informative. And I want to commend you, Dr. Jackson, along with all the participants tonight. Has been both a learning experience as well as a teaching moment. I want to commend you.
Thank you.
My mother left at 97, and I thank God for the caregiver that was there for my mother. The caregiver showed up every morning. My mother did not want to leave her house, and the caregiver showed up every morning, 6 a.m., and sometimes did not leave until 6 p.m., 7 p.m. And knowing the family dynamics, and I'm a son and a man and her pastor, certain things my mother was very strong, and certain things I couldn't do as a son, as a boy, as a man. Right. But the caregiver was able to do it. And I thank God for this ministry. I thank God for everything that tonight I was able to hear. Very personal, with medical confidentiality. These are things we don't share. These are things that we keep close to us, about our mothers, about being a caregiver, the things we share medically, the things that we have to endure, to see the CNAs, to see the nurses. When it comes to assisted living, I didn't want my mother to leave, and I didn't want her to leave her house, and I don't want her to lose her house. Every day at 97, she said, "Marvis, can I go home?" I said, "Yes." And I moved. I literally put all of my things, belongings in storage, and moved to her place so that she would know that she could come home at any time. Right. But God took her at 97. And I read a book, Love, Leave No Regrets. And that's what I'm hearing tonight. And I want to commend you, encourage you. You'll be in my daily supplications and prayers,
Thank you.
and even the ministry that God has blessed me with, and connections in the ministry with other pastors.
Yes.
Is very educational and very informative of the ministry of a strong support system,
Yes.
a strong support system of
Critical.
caregiving.
Critical.
So God bless you.
Thank
And thank you for allowing me to share these moments and to reflect upon even my mom's life and a good life, even as her son and as a pastor. That experienced members in the congregation have members now who have developed strong support systems in the church.
Right.
And the communications. And so God bless you. God bless you, Dr. Jackson, for
Thank
your
you.
work.
Thank you.
And thank you for your testimonials
Thank
that are shared and that will be shared to strengthen others. We then that are strong shall bear the infirmities of the weak.
Oh,
And
yes.
so God bless you in allowing me even to zoom in tonight and to have these moments to share, to listen, to learn, and to communicate. And thank you so much. God bless you all on this call, on this Zoom, and caregivers will be on my daily supplications.
Amen. Thank you so much, Pastor. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, ladies. So, ladies and gentlemen, I want to talk a little bit more about, well, we have a couple other things, and because we're going a little over, but I want to touch on a couple of things that I think are really important before we do close out. The client's mental. If you have a loved one and they become combative, and they're, Jennifer shook her head like, yes, I've already dealt with that. If they become combative, they are fighting you, they are just doing things that could be harmful for themselves or others. It's important that you inform their doctor, their medical professional, and tell them, look, my mom or my loved one is combative. You know, I can't do anything with them. They're not cooperating. Even if they're not bathing, they're doing something that will put them in harm's way. In other words, they're danger to self and danger to others as well. It's important that you inform the medical professional, the doctor, because the doctor may consider giving some medication to calm them, or they may, if they're not eating, they may consider giving them medication to increase their hunger, the Megastrol or the Megace. I don't know if you all have heard of that, but that's important as well. So it's important to have a relationship with their medical professional. And then also I want to talk about the religious beliefs, because that's important as well. As a caregiver, you may not have a religious belief, or you may have a different religious belief than your client, but it's critical that you include that in the caregiver experience or in the patient's, you know, life experiences. Because I know with my mom, you know, we would put on TVN in her room so she could hear it all day long. You know, we just put it on for her. And it was calming for her, I believe. And so we allowed the word, because she was used to word. She went to church all the time. And so when she got sick, that was the main thing, you know, we needed to keep in her mindset, because that was what she was used to. And so the more familiarity that you allow your loved one to have when they're going through an illness, it doesn't have to be dementia or Alzheimer's, but any illness, the familiarity, the things that they're familiar with will allow them to go through that illness and you know, move through it a little easier, a little calmer, a little less stressful, if you will. So I wanted to say that. Any comments on that? If not, we can talk about caregiver burnout. I think we did kind of hit on that, but it's critical that if you are a caregiver or someone, that you take care of yourself, because many caregivers, they end up succumbing and they end up passing before the patient that they're caring for, because they have burnt themselves out. They have run themselves down trying to make sure that that loved one or that person's needs are met. So that is critical. I wanted to bring that up. Any thoughts? Yes.
I mentioned something also is, if you have a parent, because, you know, like a lot of times you have, you know, husband and wife, or husband, wife taking care of husband, husband taking care of wife, and they're about the same age. Right. We need to make sure that we have people looking out for those caregivers who are caring for their husband or their wives. A lot of times they feel like it's necessary for them to provide all of the care for their husband or their wife, and they burn themselves out. Even if they're 75,
Right.
the husband might be 82, she's 75, she can walk, she can still go, run errands, but we have to make sure that somebody's looking out for her too.
Right.
Because there was a story that we read in a journal article about a 70, 80-year-old woman who was taking care of her 84-year-old husband, and she shot herself and she wanted to commit suicide.
Yeah.
And her thing was she just wanted out. Like no one really took the time to see that this woman, even though as strong as she was and she didn't want any help, but she was really dying inside about taking care of her husband. So everybody was so on dad that they forgot about mom, and mom was the one taking care of him. So
Right.
we also encourage, for if we have a caregiver, the caregiver has to have someone looking after them as well. So if
Caring
mom
for the
is 75,
caregiver.
yes, so caregivers need caregivers as well.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's important because a lot of times there's a couple and the husband doesn't want anybody taking care of his wife but him.
Him.
And so he's going to do it until he can't do it anymore.
But it becomes overwhelming. It becomes manageable for them. And, they're not really understanding what the doctor's saying. Their cognitive abilities have changed.
Right.
Everything slowed down. So they're overwhelmed, but they're not going to say anything to their kids because they don't want to bother the kids. But
Right. The kids got their own life.
If you have your parents are living, you're having, your mom or your dad who's taking care of, who's a caregiver of a parent, make sure you look out for the other parent, because they're not going to tell you that they have a problem. They're not going to tell you they're burnt out. They're not going to tell you how overwhelmed they are. But we know that caregiving, especially for family members, is an overwhelming job.
Oh, yeah.
And there's nothing that we can do other than kind of pry and make sure that mom or dad is okay and help out wherever you can to take the load off. Again, if they're elder adults, we want to be able to take up the pressure off of them.
Right. That's right. Any other comments about that?
I do, having experienced a parent, my dad with his chronic illnesses, taking care of my mom. I mean, there were times when I took care of my mom, I'm like, no wonder my dad, didn't want to go back on dialysis and didn't take care of himself. I sometimes I think he self-sabotaged his health just to get away from caregiving, which is a really negative way of looking at it.
Mm-hmm.
He was so resistant to help. I finally gave up. And my mom had early onset or younger onset Alzheimer's. So he passed away right after my 50th birthday, and my sister is 4.5 years younger than me. So she was, 45 and a half? I'm not good at math.
Okay.
And she had school-age kids, and my daughter hadn't even moved out until a month before he died. So I think a lot of that was he, like Kris said, we don't want to bother the kids. They've got their own life. I mean, we spend, 18, 20, 25 years making them independent. And then all of a sudden now we want to drag them back in. I personally think that as we age, we just need to understand that, we're going to need a little extra help. And you know what? We've earned it.
Yeah.
Okay. And, my grandmother, it's my dad's mom, is 102. She just recently was forced into a board and care home.
Mm-hmm.
And when we put my mom in the memory care, my sister joked with Nana about her moving into the assisted living part of the community, and she would absolutely not hear of that at all. And giving you a little flavor of what she's like. And I know she would have loved it.
Right.
She wouldn't have had to worry about home repairs. She's got glaucoma, so she's mostly blind, and now she's mostly deaf. Mm-hmm. And she was terrified that somebody would take advantage of her, financially. She had a guy redo the roof on her house, and my husband, being in real estate, he kind of supervised and checked in on it and everything. She was resistant to that as well, but she was terrified somebody would rip her off, which is not an unreasonable thought.
Right.
And but she would have loved the assisted living. She would have had somebody at her beck and call. She wouldn't have had to worry about things. And so I think we just need to shift our thinking, our belief system. Yes, we want to live in our home till the end, but that might not be possible. And you know what? If you don't want to be a burden to your kids, then you need to sit down and figure out, okay, if I get, you know, diabetes and I don't want to go back on dialysis, or I get, you know, cancer and it, you know, takes a long time to transition, or I get Alzheimer's, you know, how am I not going to be a burden? What am I going to do? And I personally think that it's imperative upon everybody to really think about the realities of aging. Yes, we can take good care of ourselves and hope for the best, but, you know, if you don't go suddenly, you're probably gonna need I think it's at least 70% of us need care before we go.
Right, right.
And if you haven't prepared for needing somebody to help you, you're just making everything so much harder. So everybody just needs to understand we're all gonna need care, and it's okay.
Yeah, it's okay.
Back to what I was saying about having uncomfortable conversations. You know, I'm 43 and a lot of my friends are the same age and our parents are aging. And this is one of the reasons why I'm at USC, is for people of color to understand that there's another way of managing our parents and giving them exactly what they want and managing health as they age. Parents don't want to be a burden to me. So we've already decided what we were going to do. They are okay with going to assisted living. They're okay living. My parents are not together, but they're okay living together so that I can have both of them together at the same time, and making sure that I purchase their long-term care insurance that I pay for, that I know that I have a certain amount of money every month when they get to an age. And again, both my parents are personable. They want to be out with people. I don't see my dad wanting to be isolated. So I have that ability to have those conversations, but I needed to have those conversations because I need to know what they want.
Right.
You know? So everybody, especially if you're my age, or, you know, I'm speaking to my generation because we don't have these conversations, but we need to have these conversations with our parents about what is it that they want. Whether they okay being a burden, are you okay being the caregiver? Which one of the kids in the family are going to take that role? My great grandmother had 10, and what they did was they rotated. So she was in a care facility, but every 10 days somebody else was there different, you know. So that's the way they did it. But you need to have those uncomfortable conversations about, you know, long-term care and what the plan is for when they cannot manage their chronic diseases.
Yeah, that's a good thought process. Thank you for that, Kris. We have another comment in the chat. How does one know when it's time to get maybe more than one caregiver? When
You're asking, it's past time.
when your loved one needs 24-hour care, or maybe even 12-hour care.
Care.
I would say, because you don't want to have anybody there 12 hours and 12 hours either. To me, that's a long shift. That's too much. So you have to figure out, once your loved one, you determine what their needs are. If they need 24-hour care, then I know sometimes agencies have 12-hour shifts, but I don't know if I would want somebody there 12 hours taking care of my loved one, depending on the work that's entailed. Because if they need like suctioning, it depends on what they need at home. You know, if they can kind of go on their own a little bit, then you may get away with having a caregiver there for 12 hours, you know, of one person, because it's not as stressful. But if you have a loved one that has a lot of need, you may want to consider having more than one caregiver. You have to make that decision.
Yes.
And anybody else want to chime in on that? We got another question too when you finish.
I think, like you said, you just gotta make sure that you have everything planned out. You gotta make sure that you have people in line. Again, as a caregiver, I would never take a 12-hour shift of somebody I knew that was really sick. It's really hard to take care of somebody and, you know, go 12-hour shifts. Now, let's say, for instance, they're able to do some things independently and everything's not as hard. I would take a 12-hour shift because I know I can give them the best in that 12 hours. But it's really hard, especially depending on the disease and what illnesses and what tasks that you have the caregiver doing. If the caregiver has to transfer a person all day long, it's probably not a good idea to have them working 12-hour shifts.
Right. And then we have another question in the comment. How do you get someone to feel comfortable with hiring someone new with the COVID risk? And I think someone else mentioned that to us before on one of the Friday Night Lives. And my thought was, you want to check with that agency or wherever you're getting that caregiver from. If it's from an agency, a caregiver agency, they should have tested that person, made sure that they were COVID free. And you can feel free to do your own, make sure you have your thermometer and you're testing them too. I mean, COVID is such a unknown beast, if you will, at this point, that you want to take every precaution that you can to protect your loved one. And that makes it even harder, especially for those who are in a skilled nursing facility, who are in a residential facility. The COVID has put a new genre on caregiving, because it's like you cannot go into the facilities. They don't want you to come there. And your family, and I've had people say, why can't I go see my family member? And I'm looking at this Facebook group that Alzheimer's, dementia. I can't even go see my mother. I haven't seen her in 3 months. And then when I go and see her, my mother has deteriorated because she hasn't had contact with anybody that she knows for 3 months. So that's a bad thing within itself. But because of the COVID, it just put just a whole new spectrum in caregiving.
I can tell you that USC right now focuses on COVID and how to kind of alleviate some of those absent caregiving, because again, people are scared to have people in their house because of COVID. I know that my research and what I'm doing right now is to try to add video technology and innovative technology to try to have people look in on your care, on your loved ones, and be able to have conversations through video, through robots, things like that. They're coming up with to help, so that the deterioration doesn't come so fast. But it's COVID has really hit the senior population, cognitively, physically, mentally. Out there. But I know that at least with USC, I know that a lot of research is geared towards helping during the COVID, because COVID is not going anywhere, right? It's not. So we have to be prepared. And these are the things that USC is researching now, is to help alleviate some of these deteriorations, and what can we do to provide services and access to people that are alone, who will live alone, or that are in facilities.
Right. We got another comment in the chat, and this is the last comment we're going to take. And the person who's sending the comments, you can always email me at caregiverchronicles247@gmail.com, and I'll be happy to, you can also get in touch with me, and I'll do a private consultation with you as well. But your question is that the best way to hire someone from an agency? We always use someone we knew, but they don't have the same skills. The agency is a great way to find people that are skilled, that are already, prepared to do the work. And sometimes they're not always the best either, but you have to kind of monitor them. Whoever you hire, whoever comes in to take care of your loved one, you want to make sure that they can handle the task at hand, because it's important that they know what to do, because your loved one is going to know. If they don't know what they're doing, they'll know too, probably. So it depends on the whole picture. You'd have to kind of weigh everything and determine what's best for your loved one. And yeah, you can find people that you know to do it. Some people have been caregivers for their family members or loved ones for a long time. So it's a decision that you would have to assess and determine what's the best thing to do. Okay. All hearts and minds clear. Any other comments? Kris, I want you to, you can give a last comment, and Jennifer and anyone else that wants to give a last comment. And then I want to tell you about our next week's session, and then we're going to close out. As I said, if you have a comment, you want to reach me, Caregiver Chronicles 247@gmail.com. You can reach me that way. I'll be more than happy to respond to you and make sure that we get the information that you need.
USC has a Caregiver Resource Center for all caregivers.
My alma mater. No, I'm just
So
kidding.
if you ever need resources for your clients, for your family, your loved one, you can always reach out to the Caregiver Resource Center. It's ran by Dr. Donna Benton. So she's wonderful. They have a lot of resources. That's all I can say. So you can look on the website. It's again, USC Caregiver Resource Center. If you need to reach out to me, you can reach me at Brannon, Brannon at usc.edu. I'm here to answer any questions about caregiving, anything about aging, anything that has to do with old people, older adults.
Elderly, seasoned individuals.
So we're
That's the word I use, is seasoned.
use the gerontology word, and
That's the politically correct way to say it.
So older adults. If you have any questions that have to do with anything around older adults, go ahead and give me a ring, kbrannon at usc.edu.
Okay, and Jennifer Fink, you want to talk about your podcast or anything you want to say to the audience?
Sure. Well, there's a couple of resources I'm going to throw out there. One is obvious, is the Alzheimer's Association. Their website is alz.org. It's like, I wish my website names or addresses were that short. They're for people that are dealing with a loved one with Alzheimer's or dementia. There is a website called Alz Authors. So it's ALZ word authors.com.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure it's .com. And they have over 200 authors who were caregivers, who have gone through the process, are in the process. If you want a book on Alzheimer's, they have it. They have books for kids, they have novels, they have anthologies and everything. Just, they're fantastic. I know a lot of the authors and they're just wonderful, wonderful people. And if you want inspiration, advice, and you can listen. I put out a new episode every Tuesday. Let me think what's coming up. I know at the very end of this month, the 29th, is 365 caregiver tips. The guest is so delightful that even if you don't need any caregiving tips, you might want to listen because she's so much fun. I have talked to so many different people. I have learned so much despite having been on this journey with my mom for 20 years. And I have fantastic guests that share everything with people. And every Tuesday, wherever you listen to podcasts, or you can go to my website, which is not short like the Alzheimer's Association. It's fadingmemoriespodcast.com. And you can find links to the podcast there. So thank you for having me on tonight.
You're quite welcome. Thank you both. And let me just tell you that Caregiver Chronicles, once again, is an online course. It has 16 modules. It actually has 19 modules. We cover all areas of caregiving from the onset of your loved one's illness all the way until they recover or transition. We talk about assisted living facilities, pharmacy, everything that you can think of. And you also will have private consultations with me. And so I just want to tell you about the courses. If you're interested, please email me at caregiverchronicles247@gmail.com, and I'll be happy to share that information with you. You can also schedule a free consultation with me as well. I also want to tell you that next week on September 25th, next Friday, Friday Night Live, we are going to be talking about navigating the medical professionals. We also have a confirmed audiologist who's going to be on. So she deals with the hearing impaired. We want to have medical professionals to talk about navigating them, because when you are a caregiver or when you are a loved one that needs caregiving, the medical professionals is critical to navigate them. And a lot of people don't know how to do that, especially those who are not healthcare professionals as I am. I know what they should do. And a lot of times when it's a medical professional, they will not give you everything that you need because they figure you don't know. And so we're going to talk about that next week. So I look forward to seeing you all. God bless you. Thank you for joining us tonight. Thank you all. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Kris. Thank you, Carol. Thank you, Pastor Davis, and all the others that are on the line. See you next Friday on Friday Night Live. and you will let us help you develop your Caregiver Chronicles. God bless. Bye-bye.
Fun.
Bye-bye.